Hi everybody, we're going to be working today with the lab that we're going to use for the ball and paddle game, and in this case it's going to be attached to your assignment. So make sure you've downloaded this, and then you need to open it by right clicking on the file and choosing to open it in Notepad first. So let's take a look at the code and then we'll work with it just a bit. So one of the things you want to make sure you have is a browser that will work with HTML5, and we're going to look at the code that you need to use for this file. Okay, HTML is going to begin with the HTML tag, and let's come all the way to the bottom, and it should end with a / HTML tag. So now it's a good time to notice the closing tags we have at the very bottom of the file, which is the closing for the HTML, the closing for the body, and the closing for the script. All three of these begin with the /. So that's a hint that it's a closing out of a tag. So let's go back to the beginning and find the opening for the body and the script. So up at the top, we see the opening again for the HTML. We also see a section which is the head. The head is very useful for the browser and for the internet, and for information to be pulled about what is in that web page and how it's to be used. So in this case it gives you the title. The title will actually appear on the tab that you see for your browser. It gives you some information also about the size of the canvas. Okay, now we find the opening for the body. The information that you see in the code prior to body will not show up on your page. Only the content that's within the body tag will show up on the actual web page. So that's important to remember. So the first thing that's done is to identify which canvas you wish to use, and then the next thing is to start or open the script using the script tag. So remember, we've seen the closing, which is at the very bottom, but this is the opening for the script tag. Okay, first of all, let me just explain, we are not going to spend a lot of time learning code, but I do want to go through a few things in the script with you and to cover a couple of points. Okay, so when you work with script and objects, when you work with programming, one of the things you must do is to define what that object is. And one of the things you do to start with is to name that object and define what it is. In this case, we use var to define the variable. And so, for example, var ball w equals 20. Notice the syntax ends in a semicolon. This is one declaration. There are multiple declarations because there are lots of things going on within the script. As we move through the script, we see where the functions start to begin after main. So the function main has some information in here, and this is where so function main is calling for the function, and within the function you see there's a couple of lines here which don't actually make anything happen. They are there to let you know what's going on. They are comment lines. And how do I know it's a comment line? Because it begins with these two /. Anywhere you see that, you will be able to recognize comments. The comments tell you what's going on within that particular part of the script. So in this case, they're explaining what's going on with the function main, which is to start the game. So right here we have the actual code that's within that function. Then once that code has been defined, then you can use function start game. Okay, so let's move through and see if we can read any more information in here and see if you can quickly pick up where some more comments are lying. Right, you're exactly right. Right in here we have some comments that explain what's going on with inside this particular function. They have multiple lines of comments to let you know if the ball is hit by the paddle. So that is explaining what's going on within that game. There are, let's quickly read through the code just to kind of see, can you spot more comment lines and the difference between the comment lines and the actual code lines. Okay, the comment lines are important. Good programmers use comments to help not only refresh their memory when they go back to work with it, but when they have to and will share the code with other people, and so that they can go back then and make changes as needed. Okay, let's move through and then carry on through the script, and then we end the script down at the bottom close to where the body ends. So let's talk about event triggers. Let's say we want to target something within a canvas area on a window, and with that we want to trigger something, trigger a response. So we will need to use some event to trigger that. So for example, it could be a mouse click, it could be you touching the touch screen within that canvas. And then with that, you will have an event response in connection with that. So let's take a look at, in the book, define a little bit more about what those events might be. So if you take a look at table 13.1, you can see some examples of mouse events. It takes you through what goes on with that, and it gives you the code snippet you need to put in for that particular trigger. You also have on page 13, page 427 within chapter 13, and in table 13.2 you have some keyboard events. So you don't necessarily have to use the mouse, you can use keyboard. And then also on table 13.3 you have some touch events which are related to using a touch screen. Okay, so the same file that we opened with Notepad, we're going to now open in a browser. And you notice I'm using the mouse to move, the mouse pointer to move things around within this canvas, and to trigger some events. But it's my mouse moving up and down that's enabling me to move this rectangle around, which means that when this square or ball is in the same location, within that same location, it will react with that and we'll have a response. Okay, I'm going to make a small change in the paddle height. I can still do it, but it's more difficult. Okay, let's go a little smaller. Okay, it's really getting harder now to get that because the paddle is getting smaller, so I have to get within that area. So that's just some changes you could make to make it harder or easier. Okay, so that's enough for right now. Let's